Hello, everyone. Thank you for sliding into our DMs. My name is Dan,
And I'm Montana.
and welcome to episode 12. We had a little bit of a gap, but life happens, and we're excited to be back. And this episode, we wanted to kind of talk about just life, thinking about our future, talking about potential repercussions in the election, and just thinking about just where we're trying to plan versus knowing that sometimes planning is just kind of meaningless. So I think that kind of is a good start for you, Montana, where in the sense of when it comes to planning, like what are some things that you are looking forward to, and some of the hurdles that you think uh will inevitably come up?
Yeah, that's like a really great question. I know for me personally, right now, there has been a lot of things up in the air. Because I recently just went back to work after being on a few weeks of medical leave, and that was like kind of up in the air of like, when am I returning? What does that look like? And so now that it's starting to become like a possibility, there's been a lot of things in my life that I've been trying to decide, do I need to plan this or do I need to take it one day at a time due to what just occurred? And for me right now, so I feel like with how I am as a person, I like having a plan, but also I feel like it's beneficial to have multiple plans or a like other options available. So if that fails or does not go the way I want to because of health or something that's out of my control, I feel a lot better and not spiraling or having those talks of like self-doubt and blaming myself, because I feel like there's a lot of times when I was on medical leave, I was more in the negative aspect of things. And I'm trying to shift focus and trying to be more positive, but also at the same time being realistic. So having like a bad day, being like, you know what? Yeah, this sucks. Like nothing's going my way, but hopefully tomorrow will be better. So for me, like long story short, I would say take it one day at a time, but also having multiple plans in place just in case if something does happen, because a lot of things unexpectedly do occur. And I'm thankful that my previous self planned for the unexpected. Because if I didn't, I would be pretty much screwed right now.
No, definitely. And I think that's something where it's that idea of like best laid plans, and no matter how well we plan, we're always never going to be fully 100% prepared. But
Yeah.
I think it's that balance. Like you can't always just have like that we'll go fly by the seat of our pants, but you also can't plan a
Hmm.
year, 2 years ahead of everything either. That's not a realistic aspect, or a healthy one, either side of that spectrum. And I think that's something for me where I know like for me, I'm trying to figure out like where do I want to be, and then what are the steps that I need to take, and like what are some of those hurdles. So I kind of like almost like you have the puzzle built already and like visioning what
Hmm.
that is, and then you have to put it like destroy the puzzle, like throw it on the ground, and now you have to like piece by piece try and figure it out. And like sometimes those pieces they're gonna be hard to find at times, or they're gonna need outside sources to help you or resources. But I think
Hmm.
it's one of those things where I feel like I have an idea of where I want to be. I just need to work towards it, and that it's okay no matter how long it takes. I think that's something where we put a lot of pressure on ourselves with time, especially when it comes to planning.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
where it's like, oh, I need to get this done by the time I'm 26 or the time that I'm 30 or
Hmm.
all these like benchmark accomplishments. And I think that's something that isn't fair for us to do. I think it's something that it the only or the harshest critic rather, the harshest critic that we have is ourselves. And sometimes we just need to remind ourselves that we're allowed to be on the right path, but not have everything built yet.
Yeah. 100%. Also realizing like it's okay to take a step back, and maybe with that plan is you start over at 30 or 35. I know a lot of people I've talked to, they've had this specific plan of what they want to do. And then turns out that doesn't make them happy. So they completely change a career or they do something completely different. And that's okay too. I definitely think the time constraint is the most difficult thing because I know for me personally, I've always wanted to travel. I've always said, okay, when I get extra money, I would love to travel. I would love it. That sounds really great, right? However, one thing I've been having to put into consideration is my health. So, okay, I plan for a trip a year from now. Great. Hopefully, my health will be better. But what else do I need to plan for? So now I'm starting to pay for the flights of, oh, if I need to cancel it, I have like the cancel insurance just in case. Same with the hotels. Or just taking a look when I go on like trips. Okay, do they have really good like urgent cares and like facilities for me to utilize if needed? Like, will my insurance take it? And it's these type of plans that I never thought I would have to plan more for. I've realized like, okay, I'm not just a normal person. I need to have this. So when I am on vacation or whatever I'm doing, I feel more prepared and I feel more at ease. So if something does unexpected or emergency does come up, I'm okay. Because before I'll always say, oh, yeah, like there's not going to be any emergencies. Everything's fine. But this year, I've had a lot of emergencies that have woken me up being like, okay, yeah, just because you're saying everything's fine and you're good and you're all right doesn't mean you actually are. You probably need to dive deeper on what's actually going on. So I think this year has really taught me if I do plan, make multiple plans and also plan strategically for Montana's best self and also Montana's worst self with health. Because we don't know when we're going to have one of those days, especially being chronically ill or being disabled. We don't know what's going to happen because some days are really great and then some days are not so good.
I think it's fascinating, like you brought this up in terms of like traveling, because that's something where currently I'm looking to travel abroad as well. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, what are the best countries, like if there was an emergency that has good healthcare, like where I can have like access to medications if they get like lost or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's just a lot of those like considerations that a lot of people don't really realize. And I think it's one of those things like as disabled people trying to plan our futures, we need to plan like potential emergency medical bills that will come into our lives,
Yep.
potential new diagnoses, like when we have a bad spell of just like our dynamic disabilities being at their
Mm-hmm.
absolute worst for a long period of time.
Yeah,
So
for
I think,
sure.
yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say I completely resonate with 100% of what you're saying, especially with wanting to travel and figuring out what country has the best healthcare and as well as medical expenses or new diagnosis, because it's great that I have insurance, which I'm super, super thankful for. But for some reason, I always thought, oh, insurance is like amazing, and then I won't have to pay this much for like a specialist. But the more and more you go to doctors, the more and more you get diagnosis or medication, the more and more your bill gets racked up and the more unexpected expenses come up. And you're like, oh, wow, like it's important, but also, what the freak?
Yeah. No, that I feel like the expense planning has always been like the biggest worry for me. Because I feel like it's one of those things where you just never know when it is, and then you have to shape up everything that you were planning for in like that short term. Like, oh, maybe I
Hmm.
won't be able to afford this like event that I wanted to go to, or I can't afford this other expense. Like recently, my car's had some issues. And that's like an expense that is hard because then it's like, oh, like how much is that going to cost? Is this going to be difficult to plan? Like if I wanted to go to something with my friends or if I wanted to go to like a restaurant or anything like that. So it like really makes you focus or like makes you really have to play that delicate balancing game. And that's something that like we've just been so used to with our disability. Like from my ER visit I had about a year and a half ago, that was like $1,200 and I have to put $100 a month into it, and that's an expense that I have to now account for the
Yeah.
coming time.
Oh yeah. I last week I had a test that I had to do, which I knew like a specialist, like 40 to 80 bucks, with like my co-payment. And I go there and they're like, yeah, it's gonna be $260. And I'm like, huh? And they're like, you can put on a payment plan. And she was so positive about it. I'm like, okay, well, I didn't want to put on a payment plan. I wanted to like pay it right then and there because I thought it was gonna be 40 bucks, not
Yeah.
that much. Like, what the freak? And that's why I was like, can I get itemized bill? And I was over here confirming, like, okay, what are you guys charging me for? What does this look like? And I find it so interesting whenever I ask for like an itemized bill, everyone just looks at me like they just got punched or something. Be like, what? You're not trusting me? And I'm like, oh no, I've gone to like emergency rooms and hospital visits where they charge me extra for a medication. And I'm like, well, I only have one dose. Why did I get charged 2 or 3 doses?
Yeah, and that's the thing where it's like you're holding them accountable and making sure that um they are not manipulating anything or taking advantage of you. And I think that's something that I think I've talked to you about this before. I think this is like right before we had our little bit of a break.
Hmm.
But it was the my cardiologist. I had gone to them under the impression that my insurance was going to accept it. I was told on both sides that it would, and then a year and a half later, they told me, "Oh, now you have to pay this bill for your stay." A year and a half later, um, and I had to fight them on that, and I want to know exactly like why things went wrong and like it just like a whole thing. Um, and that's the frustrating part too, where it was like, yeah, they were willing to take half of the expense off, but that's still like incredibly exploitative, especially like it would have been a difference if it was a month after compared to a year and a half after. And I think it's just one of
Oh
those things where it's so predatory, and our insurance system is
yeah.
just meant to keep us financially
Down.
hobbled and unable to plan long term or really have goals that involve saving money.
Yeah, it is really difficult and it's frustrating that you had to go through that and like other people in this community have to go through that. Because I know I personally have gone through that too. Like right now, today was actually pay medical bills day for me. And I was getting all these like statements coming in, like, oh, this is not a bill, but $1,000 here, $200 here. And then I finally log into like my portal and it was a completely different price than what the insurance was telling me the price was. And I'm like, why don't you guys wait to get the accurate information? Because I've called people the last few weeks about just the times I've been to urgent cares, hospitals, and things the last few months, just try and confirm everything. And they're like, oh, yeah, it was $200, but then your insurance decided to pay for it. So now you're only supposed to be this. I'm like, then why are you guys wasting paper and sending me a bill for this when it was actually a mistake and you guys didn't log it through insurance? Like, what's wrong with the system? Why is it me always having to double check if this is the accurate amount or if I want to freak out? Because the first few times where I had medical bills that I was solely responsible for, when I got like my first like big girl job at like 20, 21, they were coming in like at 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and my parents would just be like, Montana, wait. I'm like, what do you mean wait? I'm like, I don't want to like get in debt. And they're like, usually they don't put it with your insurance until like a month down the line. And then that's when you get your actual like itemized correct bill. So what you're seeing right now may not be the correct statement. And I remember that caused me so much anxiety and panic because I just started working. I started figuring out a budget system and I was trying to like figure everything out. And then this company sends me a huge bill, but then it's actually not going to be a huge bill, but we're not really sure yet because they have to wait it out. But I'm like, why am I getting told I need to pay it now? But then if they do make a mistake and then you pay the extra amount, then when you want a reimbursement, it takes 6 months to get.
And that's the thing, like the burden, all of that burden should not be on you. It should not be on any patient. And that's the frustrating part where it just they basically give you like a throw an entire like calculus textbook in front of you and just tell you to pass, get a 100 on the quiz, and just best of luck.
Hmm.
Um, and that's just not how our system should operate. I feel like it should educate the patient. It should let them know what is going to cost what and why, and it's tough because like this idyllic world that we have, we've seen that stuff in action in other countries, but our country just
Mhm.
doesn't want to do that, and that's the frustrating.
Yeah. And that's the other thing that I've been having like a hard issue with lately. I know you and I've talked about this before, but America is very big on the American dream, and we're very big on working for large corporates and having the technical 9 to 5, 8 to 5 job. And that's how you have insurance, working the 40 to 60 hours a week. That's how you have your insurance. I grew up with one parent self employed and then one parent that worked the corporate system until us kids were of age. So we wouldn't have to like worry about insurance per se. And I think it's so crazy to think about being self employed or wanting to be self-employed, and if you have a lot of health conditions, you're going to have to pay an arm and a leg for insurance to be able to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why there has not been a better system in place, specifically like allowing people to work 30 hours a week to have full-time like status and have insurance. But no, like salary means 40 plus hours a week, which like I get, but at the same time, that may not be feasible for a person. So why not worry about like the goals per se and have like more of a flexible schedule and you just make it work. But I feel like everyone is so focused on able bodies and what normal looks like that when someone is different, it's hard for them to understand and try and be accommodating around when it shouldn't even be an accommodation at all. It should just be accessibility.
No, I agree with you entirely, and that's the thing where it's been built on not only an able-bodied society, but it's built on like the whole individualistic capitalist society. It's that idea of like you just got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. It doesn't matter if it's a big cost and you can't afford it. You got to figure it out. You got to work hard. And it's just that almost illusion where it's like anyone, regardless of who they are or able-bodied or not, that they can climb through the ranks of anything because it's simply that's not the case.
Yeah. And I feel like our society and just like America in general, we're so sold on this American dream that I'm starting to realize the American dream is actually people keep working until they're burnt out and have enough money for them to start relaxing.
Yeah.
And that's not a life. Like, why are you going to be working a job that you hate for so many years just so you can retire at like 60 or 65? I think 65 is actually like the technical age, is when you can get like social security or whatever, I think. And I've always told people, like when I was in high school and starting college, that oh, like in my 30s, I'm going to be working part time because if I do have kids, I would like to be like involved with them. So I'll probably like work on the side. And everyone just like laughed at me, like, like that's going to happen. And we're thinking, why do we have to be bought into the system? Like, why can't we create like a better system or something that works better for us? Like, why do we have to be like everyone else? Like, why is that an American dream? Be like that one person who achieved it this way. I feel like we should be able to do what we want to do and figure it out and change the plan accordingly because things happen.
Yeah. No, you're entirely spot on, and I think it's just that idea of like it's so people are so used to how it is now that they don't want it to change. And even if it's not beneficial to people, they'll still want it. Um, and it's just frustrating. It's really, really frustrating seeing that and that it could get worse because like we talking about thinking about the election. Like
Mhm.
if it goes a certain way, President Trump wins, then the ACA could very much be in danger. And then that brings back things like disabled people like us being charged more, being denied coverage due to it. The lifetime caps, where literally people were denied breast cancer treatment because they got treatment for their acne when they were a teenager, and they got denied their breast cancer coverage when they were in their 40s. Um, and it'll
Yeah.
just put people, plunge people into bankruptcy, poverty, homelessness, suicide. There's just, it's
Yeah.
scary that we always, every time that there's an election, it's basically a fight for our lives.
Yeah, 1,000%. And it's scary to have the unknown, like you were saying, of what will happen. Because I know a lot of people I've talked to, they're like, oh, yeah, Trump's definitely going to win. And I'm so shocked on how like sure everyone is when we haven't even started the voting process. And I'm trying to stay optimistic that we will have someone in office that cares about disabled people and care about our rights and what's best for the American society and just overall like us, but I'm not really sure of what the future will hold. I just know me personally, whenever someone in my family or someone I know that talks about like, oh yeah, like we need a Republican, and I'm like, well, let's talk about this a little bit deeper. And that's when they get kind of shocked about it. I'm like, well, they could take medications that I need to keep my eyesight. Like I could not be allowed to have medications due to him possibly being in office. And they look at me, they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, like some medications that you're on is for a specific illness, or it's on because it helps with specific inflammation. And mine's like inflammation, but also has pretty severe side effects. And that's when the talks of abortions, and I feel like everyone's just very black and white, just being like, abortions are bad, abortions are bad. And to me, I've always been like, I feel like it should be the person's choice. No one should be taking that choice away. People did abortions in the 1500s, but it was not safe. They did what they needed to, and a lot of people died. My thing is at least keep it on the radar and keep it legalized. So if something does bad happen, then no one will have to feel like they don't have a choice. Not everyone has to do it, but I'm tired of everyone just thinks, oh my God, like you support killing babies. No, that's not it. I support healthcare. I believe this is a part of healthcare. And everything's not black and white.
Yeah.
And I may be lucky and it won't happen to me, but I've also have known and heard stories about people who were really excited to have kids and they wanted to start a family, but there was no heartbeat, or the baby was very deformed and it was likely going to die and the mom would die with it. With those scenarios, we need to have options available for us. So I think people just need to research and figure out what's best for them, not what other people are telling them in their ear. Because I do have some family members who I love dearly, but they're so hard Republican or so hard Democrat, they don't care. They will just pick the Republican or the Democrat. While I'm like, okay, how about we talk about the pros and cons?
Yeah. No, and I think that's something people don't want to engage in debate anymore. And I think that's something where a lot of people um see things in black and white and right versus wrong. And I think there are topics that are like that. If you're saying like the rights of people uh should go away, like any marginalized group or anything like that, that's not a debate. And I can't
Mm-hmm.
debate science with you either. I can't debate if something that is a fact and you're telling me it's not a fact, I can't debate that with you. That's
Yeah.
just simple. Like it's not worth it. Um the things that I feel like can be debated, and I think it's important to recognize like which things can and cannot be. And it's that idea of like when it comes to abortion, that idea of if that goes away, what other healthcare are people going to take away, or what outcomes are we
Yeah.
willing to sacrifice people for? And it's funny, I was actually talking to one of my friends today. It's the first time we talked in a while. And we were talking because we hadn't talked in a while. We were talking about our graduations. She had finished her undergrad, I finished my master's. And I was talking about in my master's, I was sitting next to people, I had done it online. And so it was the first time I was really talking to people in my program in person. And one of the people mentioned, like, in one of their classes, like, the professor stopped in the middle and was like, okay. I want to know everyone's most controversial political opinion. So then all of us were sharing ours, and mine is that I am anti right to choose death. I don't believe in like voluntary euthanasia. And that was something that it was interesting. Like my friend that I was talking to today was a very big proponent of that, and we had this conversation. For me, it's always been that idea of like if you let people choose to die, then then choose that as healthcare, then insurance companies are going to continue to push people towards that outcome and choose that because it is simply the cheaper option than giving people care and protection. Um, and that's the slippery slope where like if you make it accessible to everyone compared to like things like terminal illness, and then even if it's just terminal illnesses, what are we defining as terminal? Um, and
Mhm.
that is another difficult part. And I think that was something that we were able to have that conversation because that was a perspective that she had never considered, but then also like hearing the perspective too of just like it is in a way healthcare, and choosing your own way out is something that matters to a lot of people.
Yeah, I never thought about that until like, you brought up that conversation of just like the change of perspective. I wish more people were self-aware and open to having those hard conversations like you've talked about, specifically. Um, and if they do have those hard conversations, possibly having like those boundaries of knowing, okay, when is a good spot to say, okay, we can say pause or we can stop before it gets even messier. Because I do know some people that I've had debates with, they just want to be right. That's all they care about, no matter what. They just want their voice to be louder than anyone else. And sometimes that's not healthy. So I'm glad you were able to have that conversation with your friend and them seeing it from like your perspective of like the healthcare and what that would mean if people were allowed to do that more often.
Yeah, and I think that's something that when it comes to those debates, I feel like unfortunately the internet has definitely influenced that, and like a lot of the way our media is now, where people just want that sound bite that they can tote up, or that they can like that idea of like they're the loudest one in the room, so that way they're automatically right. Like we've
Hmm.
all encountered those people, or people that we've seen like on the media, and like people, it doesn't matter how the whole debate went, but if you have that sound bite on social media that's running around, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
um and it's frustrating. Like that's something that we see like in presidential debates and things like that. And it's unfortunate because it, that type of toxicity and that type of way that discourse goes around infects everybody, because if they see it
Mhm.
normalized on any, on like TV or social media, it's just going to be normalized for them and to act that way in society.
Yeah. I don't understand how or why people throw each other under the bus. This is one conversation I've had with like my partner because I've been seeing a lot of campaign ads and it's like, oh, it's approved by blah blah blah. And usually 50% of them at least are throwing their candidate under the bus on a policy they did or something that's happened and they're like misusing specific words. And I'm over here thinking, why can't we all play fair and nice? And my partner just starts laughing. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, you're just too kind hearted sometimes. And I'm like, I just don't think it should be this difficult of if you have a problem with that person, you communicate with that person, or like you just cut them out of your life and just not and be the bigger person. That's what we were taught as toddlers and kids. Be the bigger person. Always be the person that you want someone to treat you. But then as an adult, I'm over here, I'm like, where did these kids go preschool or these adults go preschool and like school at? Like were they not taught to be nice and treat others the way you want to be treated? And it just really shocks me on how toxic some things can really be, especially with the election period. And I'm like, this is already a stressful time. How about we get rid of that or try and minimize it as much as we can?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's something where people I think this election will really focus on that idea of like, do we want to move past the toxicity that we have faced in our politics the last 8 years, or do we just want to continue getting further and further separated from our values and our ideas? And it's scary because it's so close of an election.
Few months away.
Yeah, it's close polling wise, it's close month wise. And I'm scared. Like I think it's one of those things where I feel like a lot of disabled people are
Yeah.
scared because depending on how this election goes, uh our rights are gonna be on the line. And I think it's something too where people are always like, oh, why don't you just like whenever it's a debate like with like trans care or abortion or anything, like, oh, why don't you just move to another state? Well, people can't just like up and leave. Like I don't think people realize how unrealistic of a proposition
Hmm.
that is.
Yeah, it's not that easy. Remote jobs are a lot more common now because of COVID, but that's still not the case. A lot of jobs today is mostly hybrid. I'm lucky I have a remote job that like I adore, but my partner, his work is within like a 10-mile radius. So he would have to live around like the area that we live around now. My mom, same thing. Her job is within like a 30-mile radius for her clientele. And it's not that easy of being like, oh yeah, I'm going to pick up everything and move. That's the thing where people have talked about, oh, just get a passport because if this does happen, women can just go have abortions in Canada. And I'm like, well, that is an option, but also it's an option for likely the higher middle class or the upper class. So now we're looking at it, like we're completely not thinking of other people. We're just thinking of, oh, well, if you can afford it, then you're worthy. And that's not okay. We need to think of the whole society, not just the middle and upper part.
I agree. And I think that's the thing where our society is in its best moments when everyone is doing well, not
Yeah.
just the top people, the elite, whatever you want to say, characterize it. Um, it's something that when our poorest people in society are still able to succeed, that's what matters. Um, and yeah, it's just sad that it feels like the last three elections have just been like a battle for our rights, and that's something that we shouldn't have to have in our lives. But
No.
it's an unfortunate part of our current state. But I'm trying to find a good way to. I think one thing
Get,
that we can say is just not to get complacent, not to let ourselves get
mhm.
down, not to feel like we got this in the bag, nothing like that. We always have to be ready to fight and be ready to defend our rights no matter what.
Yeah.
Um, and I think with that, um, that's the end of our episode. We have 5 minutes left in our Zoom call here. Um, want to thank everyone who's listened over the course of all of our episodes, and we're excited to be back. Episode 13, we're hopeful to be out soon. Um,
Okay.
if you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to subscribe, like, comment. Please follow Disability Rewritten on Instagram. We also have a Patreon, so that way y'all can support. And that's all on my end. Is there anything else you want to add, Montana?
Uh,
No. All right. Well, with that, I want to thank you all for listening, and I hope you all
Pretty
have a great day.
soon. Yeah. We hope you guys have a wonderful evening and hopefully everything will turn out the way it should be. Hopefully.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.